Hello, everyone. This is WOLFpak Live TV. I'm your host, Wendy Fortino, and I have today a very awesome and interesting guest, the unlikely duo between the two of us. We have the one and only, viral everywhere right now for his amazing debate skills. We have the one and only Andrew Wilson. Woo. How are you?
Well, I mean, where's the confetti and the red card? No, I'm kidding. I'm doing well.
Throwing confetti at you like it's all over the place. You see it?
Yeah. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. So you probably were wondering, what in the heck is this random fitness girl reaching out to me for, wanting to do this podcast? And honestly, here's the thing. And I saw like comments, of when I posted about us doing this together, people like, this is a very unlikely duo. And I think that that's actually the reason why I really wanted to sit down and talk to you, because I think that, here are two people who are from completely different walks of life, but I would beg to differ that we actually probably have a lot more in common than people realize. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. I have no idea yet.
Well, I know you more than you know me, so I'll say yes.
Yeah.
But you do fascinate me very much. You've been all over the place. You've been on, I've seen you on the Whatever podcast. And I want to talk about some of that, but I actually want to start with that. So now that I've been seeing you a lot more on the Whatever podcast, can you tell me how you got introduced to that world and what draws you to being in that arena so much lately?
So essentially, I'm a conservative, I guess you would say, analyst, right? I'm a political analyst.
Right.
And I engage in blood sport debates, and I have since my career online started. So a lot of that veered into what was called the red pill content. Mm-hmm. The intersection with the red pill content began because I was wrecking progressive scumbags all over the internet. And oftentimes there would be an intersection on panels between people who called themselves red pill or part of the manosphere, which I didn't know very much about at the time.
Right.
So I was interested in it. And ended up debating with a lot of them, because it turns out many of these manosphere content creators are just as fucking degenerate and scumbag as the feminists are. So
right.
That was kind of my introduction into what is called the manosphere. And so the crucible essentially tangles up with progressive ideology of all kinds. It doesn't matter where the ideology comes from or how it's masked or who masks it. So it doesn't matter if you mask it as being red pill. It doesn't matter if you mask it as being, something else.
Right.
The ideology always seems to find its way through. And our job is, we're kind of the people who are behind progressive enemy lines, if you will. And our job is to sabotage, cause havoc, mayhem, and put the brakes on as much of that as we possibly can. And we do it very well. So that's how we got introduced to kind of the manosphere content. How I got introduced to Whatever was Brian had reached out, asked me if I wanted to go on a show in California. And I said, sure. I flew out. I did the first show, and it didn't go very well because I wasn't used to doing live formats.
Right.
So that was the first time I'd done a live format. So I was getting used to it the very first time out. And he said, look, why don't you stay and we'll try it again in a week. And then that one I was a lot more comfortable and was able to just kind of blow everybody out who was there. Yeah. Then he started having me back more, then more, until I became the most recurring guest on Whatever.
Yeah. There's two things that I picked up on when I watched that. Okay. Number one, obviously your insanely good debate skills. Actually three things. Your insanely good debate skills. Number two, no matter who you're talking to, something that I notice about you is you always take the time to take the other person's argument seriously, even if there seems to be a very drastic difference in your intellectual capacities, if that makes sense. I mean, I feel like a lot of times you're talking to people who have a lot less, tenure on this earth, who have, don't have as much experience and maybe aren't as knowledgeable on a subject matter, but you always take them seriously and you really hear what they have to say. But then the third thing I notice is, engaging in these conversations where there does seem to be a really big gap in your level of intelligence and experience, I would imagine that that would really frustrate you, but you seem to keep diving into the fire. So tell me what the process is there. What
Well,
you're
it's not frustrating to me.
yeah,
So I think that I try to be charitable to what people are saying,
yeah,
because people make missteps all the time when they're trying to convey a thought. And so
right.
I try to make it as clear as possible before I annihilate whatever the worldview is. And the reason I want to do that is because I don't want them to feel like their argument was taken out of context,
Sure.
or their belief was taken out of context. I need them to see for sure that I understood what they were saying,
Right.
and then that's when you destroy the argument. Once they understand completely that you understand, that's when it's actually effective to
Right.
destroy the argument, because then they go, oh shit, okay,
Mhm.
that's then that becomes very frustrating for them. For me, um it's never frustrating, because there's so many feminists. It's a ridiculous amount of feminists. There's so many, but
Well,
we reach thousands upon thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, actually, of people
right.
via clips and things like this. And so I think that outreach of the worldview and helping to assist other people to engage in that worldview, so that they can verbally, in the age of information, we're dealing right now
Yeah.
with a whole different type and style of combat that men have never had to engage in before. So it's
It's
no
true.
longer physical. It's no longer with weapons. It's no longer with, roving bands of marauders. What it is now is it's an information war, and it's verbal judo. That's the kind of that's going to be the combat of the future. And so that's
Right.
what we're actually engaging in, and that's the
Right.
only way that this information war can be fought, is through the arena of these kinds of ideas. And so
Yeah.
the Crucible's at the forefront of doing that.
Had you thought of this is something that I actually was thinking of is like by going onto a podcast like the whatever podcast where the age range of the young women on that show tend to be I would say an average probably in their early 20s ish, right? Um in a
Between the average age is between 20 and 40, roughly.
okay.
Hmm.
Well, impressionable age range, I would say, where I have actually witnessed women coming onto the show with what they thought was their worldview, but then you kind of lay out the stats for them, and you lay out some facts, and you explain to them what they're actually saying about their case that they're trying to
Yeah.
make, and they actually do change their mind because maybe
Yep.
they thought this is what I came in believing was my worldview, and then you have this ability to not make them change their idea, but I think an idea that they actually had to begin with, but they had been misinformed in what they thought their idea was. I've seen that happen, and it's masterful the way that you do that. And I think it really takes taking someone seriously, letting them lay out what their argument is, and then, like you said, debunking the argument, explaining the facts that actually are, and then they go, like actually that makes a lot more sense to me now.
Yeah, the idea here, so that you understand, most people don't know why they believe the things they believe.
Right.
They don't actually
I
know
agree with
why.
that.
And the reason is because introspection is not valued inside of our society, and hasn't been valued. Maybe it was before I was a kid, but even when I was a
Mhm.
kid, introspection was not a valuable thing. So most people, all of their knowledge and everything they operate off of falls under just two categories. The first category is experience, and then
Mhm.
the second category is regurgitation.
Right.
And so most people, I would say 99.9% of the people you talk to are going to fall under one of those two categories. So I'm going to try to convey and convince you with experience, meaning, okay, well, I've talked to hundreds of people about this topic,
Right.
and because I have an informed opinion based around all these different people that I've talked to.
Right.
It's a really, really bad way to go about doing things, is just to say, well, based on my experience, this is true, therefore it's true. But
Right.
that's the kind of the first category of the non-credentialization. So people do fall back on credentials, but they first start with experience. And then they move into the second idea. And the second idea is just regurgitation. This is what WebMD says. This is what this is what the dictionary says. This is what this institution says. This is what that institution says. So so ultimately, all of it really boils down to just these two types of ideas for how people are informed. Now, here's how people are not informed and how they should be informed.
Okay.
How they should be informed is they should take a good look at their worldview and actually think about it through to the end and see if they're fucking stupid. They should actually see if they're dumb. They should be like, wait, perhaps when I follow this through to the end, I have been following a worldview that is really stupid and just never thought about it before. But what happens is if you do that, it causes cognitive dissonance. And that's actually painful for people. When they experience cognitive dissonance, they feel like they've been tricked. They feel, oh, my whole worldview is a lie. My life's a lie. How could I have believed this forever? And blah, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so with being tricked comes a feeling of shame and humiliation. And so people try to avoid that feeling, like nothing else I've ever seen. I've seen people, for instance, argue on Twitter. Two people, nobody's even paying attention to them, trying to own each other for 18 afternoons in a row. Topic nobody cares about. But the point is like if one of them's right and the other one's wrong,
right,
and that means that one of them will have to take a look at their worldview, and it might cause them some amount of discomfort. And people will avoid discomfort above any other feeling. So,
but that's something that the observer can actually notice. And this is one thing that fascinates me about you is I have actually seen it's an energy that you can see through a screen when you're talking to somebody and you make total sense and you're talking to somebody who doesn't make sense at all, right? As a viewer, I'm observing this interaction that you're having, and it's so clear. It's so clear who, I don't want to say the winning side, but really we do, I think just in, as a society, I think we're just naturally inclined to see, the team that we want to be riding with and the team that we don't or whatever. But it also, it's aligning with something that we go, oh, wow, that really makes a lot of sense. I've been guilty of falling into misinformation,
Sure.
But then it's hearing people like you and other people that make a lot of sense that make me go, you know what, actually this makes a hell of a lot more sense to me.
So just so you shouldn't even feel bad about that, right? So most beliefs a person holds are false. Most, not some, right? Most, the overwhelming majority of beliefs that people have are false beliefs, and they're justified and predicated upon nothing more than an intuition, or nothing, not even really with empirical evidence most of the time. They don't even have that, and that's not even a great standard. So because of this, because most of the things which people believe are false, it's really easy for you to fall into the trap of just kind of continuing the false belief into eternity. Because ultimately in your day-to-day life, you might not see this as becoming something which is a challenge, right? You can hold false beliefs and still seem to get by pretty well, right? You can still hold a job and buy groceries and contribute to the economy and have children and all. You can do all those things, even though you're totally wrong about everything you believe. But unfortunately, if you're going to ever achieve anything, if you're ever going to move towards something, which is great, or you're ever going to move towards something which is a higher calling than yourself, you're going to have to challenge your belief structures. And so it's very, very simple for people to fall into a false belief. So I wouldn't even beat yourself up about that.
Something that really fascinates me is I think about some of the polarizing figures that people have, cult followed, right? You have and we're going to talk about this, but we have the Dan Bilzerian, we have the Wes Watson, you're talking about the red pill kind of arena that you were dealing with. What do you think is the reason why so many young men are attracted to these energies? Because there are some cult followings, and if you're okay with it, I'd like to share a little interaction between you and Wes also that we can talk about.
Yeah, sure. So so the reason for this is because the dating dynamic is now essentially impossible. It's been rendered impossible. And it's not, when I say the dating scene, this bleeds into basically the intersex dynamics between men and women. They're completely screwed up. They're turned around on their head.
Yeah.
And so
We're
this
from the same
starts,
generation, and I'm with you on this.
yeah, so it starts with this. It starts with the access to social media.
Yeah.
So with the access of social media, the tier of men who ordinarily would not be available locally
Yeah.
to a woman are now available to that woman. And so because of that, it's become a smorgasbord buffet of almost every woman on planet Earth competing for a small select few men. And when I say a small select few, I think people get this kind of wrong all the time. They think that they're all competing for some like Giga Chat or something like this. And many probably are. But what they're competing for are really just things which you would think were pretty commonplace, but actually aren't. For instance, a man who's over 6 foot, a man who makes more than, makes 6 figures a year. These are common enough,
Right.
but they're pretty uncommon when it comes to the availability for all women to have.
Yeah.
And so if all of these women are competing for this small group of men, then what ends up happening is only by the time they're in their 30s and they have not been able to net one of these, they end up settling down with one or with somebody else who's not one of these, kind of like mega giga chads or whatever you want to call them. And so that leads then to a population collapse, which we're experiencing because women aren't getting married till they're in their 30s. And so they're only having one child if they even have one. And so this is like, it's this massive bleed over effect, which happens. And because of that, so social media starts that, but then it continues from there. So women's liberation also introduces the birth control pill with access to birth control. Now you can also have as much sex as you want without the consequence of sex. And so women don't have to be virtuous, and neither do men. And then, of course, it leads from there into the idea of liberation in the workplace. And so once that happens, now women are competing against their own best interests because they're trying to take 50% of the total take of all pay in the United States or more to themselves while still finding a man who out earns them. So it's like it's being in competition with yourself. It's insanity. But this is the way that the marketplace is currently set up. So it's impossible for men to win.
Well, and it's like you don't even have to agree with your lifestyle to say that you are making a lot of sense. And here's what I mean. Right now, I think the thing that bothers me is not how somebody wants to live their life, but it's when somebody wants to have their cake and eat it too, right? Like you want to be like an independent woman and, have your own job. You want to have, you want to basically take care of yourself and you want to have everything, you'll be totally independent, but then you also want the chivalry and you want a man to do all the things that he would do. And it's funny because I actually wanted, if you're okay with it, your wife is a badass, by the way, Rachel. Your wife's name is Rachel, right?
Yeah.
Okay, she's a total badass because you were on a show talking about this very subject, okay? The panel said something to you about like, bring your wife on here. And you said, oh, I can go get her right now. You got your wife. She was taking care of your kids. She came downstairs to the podcast and she just ripped them a new one. And she made so much sense. And so if it's okay with you, I just want to show just a little bit of that.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So she came on the podcast. She just comes down and man,
be in the relationship. So yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about investment, I'm pretty invested. So he feels like, if I want this traditional wife role and I actually do all those things, then he feels like it's worth it to provide. But if I were to come in here and be like, well, I want my own career and you have to do your own laundry and we're going to split the chores 50-50 and I want to be equal, he'd be like, okay, bitch, then you can be equal and pay for all your shit. Like, why would he pay for my stuff? This makes no sense. You guys have to choose. Do you want to be strong, independent, equal women, or do you want chivalry and protection?
So basically that's what I'm trying to say is like, you don't have to want to live the exact same lifestyle as you and Rachel, but what you both are saying makes a lot of sense, right? It's like whatever path you choose, but what we're seeing is wanting all of it at the same time. You know what I mean?
Well, Rachel, she's the best anti-feminist debater possibly in the world. I'm not sure that there's anybody who's her match. And she professionally debates with feminists. I mean, she's highly skilled at it. And she's written a book, very good book called Occult Feminism, which roots out the history of feminism and where it came from and what it's marching towards. To say that she absolutely loathes and despises feminists is putting it moderately. She absolutely loathes and despises them in every way you can conceive of. And the reason that she does is because they're a direct threat to the dynamic of the thing which matters the most, which is the intact family unit. In order to have that, you have to have a structure of patriarchy in place. And the feminist ideology's entire design is to break down structures of patriarchal systems and move them towards an egalitarian system where men and women both exist as some sort of interchangeable widget.
Yeah.
And we're not interchangeable widgets. And because of that, if you destroy the system, the dynamic and the backbone of all of what society is built off of, which is the family, every family is a miniature society. It has its own customs, and it has its own taboos, and it has its own culture, and it has its own assholes, and it has its own, kind of patriarchs that are looked up to. It has its
Really
own.
fast, who's the asshole in your patriarchy?
Oh, my dad, for sure.
Oh, it's not you? Okay, keep going.
No, I'm nice. I'm a nice person. I'm super nice. But anyway, so all of them, so they're mini cultures. That's what they are. They're miniature little cultures, and from those cultures, more cultures evolve, right? So your kids, then they go out and have 5 kids. They have 5 kids. Now suddenly your family becomes massive. They all have their own like little interconnected cultures and this and that. But society is a reflection of that. And so to break that down is to destroy all culture. It's to destroy all culture instantly. And that is the feminist agenda, is to, and this is a byproduct. They don't even know that this is the byproduct of what it is that they're doing. But ultimately, it's to destroy any semblance of a unified culture.
I think when you say like that, it makes a lot of sense. But I do think that, and I can vouch for myself. I remember coming out of like high school and college, and I remember I'm a feminist, because I believe in women's rights, and I believe in, women being independent, and I felt like it just felt so right. You know what I mean? But my definition of it was not the actual definition of what it was. You know what I mean? I think you're thinking, as a young woman, and this is why I think it's good that you're going on the podcast with like really young audiences, where they're at a really, impressionable age. You're actually in an age range where I think you can actually make a difference and make an impact in what, people's false views of what they actually believe. But, when you actually start to understand what exactly you are believing, that's when you start to make your shifts, right? You start to go, well, no, I do believe in women's rights. I do believe in independence. I do believe, but at the same time, I'm not, anti all this other stuff. I'm not trying to take away from, or do I really believe that I can do everything that a man can do? No. And I'm like one of the strongest women that I know.
Mm-hmm. But in comparison to the strongest men, it's nothing, right?
Well, even some of what you would consider the weakest men can still, run faster than me, jump higher than me, lift more weight. I mean, I bet, I don't know if you exercise regularly, but I would be willing to bet that you're probably stronger than me. And I lift weights every day, it's just,
just physiology. There's nothing you can do about it. And I don't even know why that's such a problem though, right? It's just people are constructed the way that they're constructed. Yeah. And women are not constructed to be interchangeable with men. This idea that they are is really stupid. And it's created this imbalance in culture, which is essentially destroying all of culture. I mean, it's coming through essentially like a massive wrecking ball, and it's just destroying everything in its path. And there's not a whole lot that you can do about it, because we can't, unfortunately, put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? Once it comes out, it's out. And what the only thing that's going to save us at this point is, luckily, feminists don't generally reproduce. And that's that. I mean, that's a good thing moving forward in the future, because the religious and the patriarchists do reproduce.
Well, you're doing what you believe in, what your work is, and you're doing everything that you can to make an impact, which is good. We're always going to have extremes, and the volume of people that we have in these extremes is what I think worries some of us, which is, you have like the crazy extreme, red pill community, right? Like the conversation you had on stage with Wes Watson, which we can pull that up in a second. And then you have the extreme, version of feminism, which I didn't realize I'm not a part of that, right? But then you have this right in the middle where everything just makes sense, regardless of how you're actually living your life. It just makes sense when you hear it. And I don't live my life the exact same way you do, but what you say makes sense,
Yeah, you would probably enjoy having a conversation with a guy named P.F. Young. He's what he calls himself, something akin to a radical moderate.
A radical moderate.
Radical centrism. That's what radical centrism.
Interesting.
But I think
terminology it can't.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's tongue in cheek, but I mean, he's basically pointing to, I'm in the middle of a lot of these issues, but I actually think that that's the worst spot to be. I think the worst spot to be actually is in the middle, and the reason I think that is because ultimately, if there is an idea which is detrimental, it's dogged to society, horrific for it, even trying to take the good angles or what you perceive to be the good angles just perpetuates the ideology. It just continues it on and on and on. And it's so destructive at this point. And the fruits of it are so clear at this point. I mean, no, women don't even want to be labeled as feminists. It gives them the ick. If you call a woman a feminist now, they're like, I'm not a feminist. But they are. Most of them are.
I would slightly push back on you on that, because I would say in the moment when you're involved in the conversation, it may feel that way. But, when this content is published, you do have the court of public opinion that comes into play. And when this content gets viewed and it spreads out there into the webosphere, you do have a little bit more of an impact than you realize. Even if in the moment the conversation feels unproductive, or you feel like you're in the middle of a conversation, the energy that you feel through the screen is so real. Like you could tell.
Yeah, there's definitely an impact. I'm just saying that, ultimately. So let me ask you this instead.
Yeah.
Let's maybe change the dynamic of the conversation a little bit,
right.
Even though it's your interview, right? I'm just going to hijack your interview real quick.
I love it.
What can I do to convince you to come to the dark side today? What can I do to convince you, my best Palpatine voice, Wendy, come to the dark side of the Force? What can I do to bring you over to this side of the aisle where you are viewed then as a radical conservative, anti-feminist lunatic? How can I get you on this side? What would I need to do to convince you to go down that pathway?
I'm glad that you defined the dark side, because that was going to be my first question back, was what would you define as the dark side? It really, here's how I look at it. I'm very open to absorbing and taking in information. I try to go in. I know you had said if you go into an argument, you have to pick a side. Okay. I agree with that. But I have an idea of what I believe. But if I don't know all the facts, if I don't totally understand everything that has to do with an argument that I believe, I don't feel strongly about it. And I like to go into it with like a little bit more of a malleable mindset. And so when it comes to anything political, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be totally transparent here. I don't know enough facts to have a strong seated opinion about any one thing. I'm very open to absorbing and taking in content, and I'm very malleable at this point, especially because I believe that results matter. And I think that, a lot of times we believe so strongly something, even if everything around us is going a certain way. We see inflation happening, but we're told that it's not, kind of a thing. We see it happening, but what are we doing about it? Right. I will see something happening. I don't know all the facts. I'm open. And that's why people like you really fascinate me.
So I would start with this. Start with understanding this concept, which I'll convey to you now, which is that you, in that mindset, are the most easily controlled individual on planet Earth because you're malleable, because you're malleable.
Well,
and
okay.
so when you absorb,
yeah,
right, you have to understand that everybody absorbs information and knowledge through a prism.
Can I stop you really fast?
Yeah.
Just really fast. Okay. I'm going to actually interject with one thing. Okay. I'm going to add a variable that I forgot to add. I have very good discernment and a very good instincts. So
Mhm.
when I hear something, yes, I'm malleable, but that's only because I want to make sure that I totally understand the argument and the facts. And then I do trust my instincts, and I do believe I have very good discernment, which I think doesn't necessarily put me into the category that you're putting me into, but continue.
Well, I'm not really even trying to put you in a category. I think you're just in the category that a lot of people are in, which is this.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Everything that you view in life, you're going to view through a worldview. You're going to view it through a prism. Think of it as your own magnifying glass.
Right.
And so everybody's going to have one of these worldviews. Sometimes the worldview relies on a principle like live and let live. Sometimes
Right.
the principle is do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. Sometimes people default to the categorical imperative, treat or do unto others as you'd have done unto you, or the golden rule, right?
Okay.
But everybody has some worldview, idea of a worldview, which they filter all information through. And so my challenge to you isn't to filter in information, but to discern what your worldview is, because then you'll always be able to discern information correctly. And this is the problem that I think, again, in that 99.9% of people I'm talking about, when I say they hold false beliefs, it's because they actually have not correctly identified the bifocals they're looking at the world through. So once you identify what your worldview is, then you can assess truth claims way easier based on that worldview. And most people don't know what theirs is.
Right. No, it's good that you're challenging my bravado on that, because I do think that there's probably a semblance of me being afraid of, even if I feel strongly about something deep down inside, there's probably a filtration of, oh my gosh, I'm going to make somebody upset. I'm going to offend somebody. I don't know if I feel comfortable opening up about exactly how I feel about this, because, you know, someone's going to be offended. And that's probably a filtration that I am not totally bringing to the surface or acknowledging to myself. You know what I mean?
But what
a lot of us.
what about the great need that society has now of people who aren't complete lunatics, and how necessary they are in pushing back against these insane worldviews? And in order to do that, you are going to risk offense no matter what. And people are going to hate you. They're going to cancel you off of all sorts of things like they do me. They're going to do all sorts of things like that. But it doesn't defeat the kind of overarching idea that it's still necessary, right? We have to push back somewhere, somehow, without without the fear of offending the world. Because the truth is that if you tell the world the truth, they literally will crucify you for it.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
So the idea here, my challenge to you isn't to absorb more knowledge or absorb more information. It's exactly the opposite. My challenge to you is instead to think about, for the next year, the prism in which you filter knowledge. What is it ultimately, the core of you, the core principle that you believe in, that you filter all knowledge through? And you'll see an entirely new environment open up for you on how you perceive knowledge and how you intake knowledge and your perception of things.
Well, I guess I do feel like I've always lived with this idea that, you know, live and let live, kind of a mantra. But the malleable part of that is, as I continue in life, I do find that there are people who the way that they live their life does affect and impact other people, that with unintended or maybe even intended consequences. That scares me. You know what I mean?
That's so what you just did, you identified a great worldview, right? The live and let live mantra. And then you identified this massive weakness in it. And you're like, maybe that's not the worldview I want to hold in order to absorb knowledge. Right. So for me, right, I'm an Orthodox Christian. So I everything in my worldview, the bifocals I view the world through is through Christian ethics. So what you call discernment, what I utilize to discern what is true, what is not, besides the philosophical aspect of Christian ethics, is also the understanding of the moral implications of everything that I do, perceived or non-perceived, right? So I can make good value judgments very quickly as to what's going on, who's correct, who's incorrect, why I don't care about what you think about this or do care about what you think about this. So so what I think if people are having trouble discerning information, they're confused, like, man, how do I make sense of all this mumbo jumbo? They should probably just start with how they view the world itself.
No, that's a really good point, honestly. And I do think that it takes a, a next level of intellect to have the self-awareness that I do, where I'm going, okay, I feel like I've lived my life with a certain worldview. I'm questioning it, right? Yep. I'm finding myself drawn to people like you and some other people that I find myself drawn to that just make a lot of sense to me. I love Rachel. I, recently discovered her, and she is a total badass. When she talks, she just makes sense. It's like, to me, it's not even, you can't even really argue it. It's like so much sense.
But that's because she follows Christian ethics. Yeah. And so the pillar for everything. So every worldview has a central pillar, a column that's holding it up. And most of them are very brittle. If you touch them, they fall apart. And that's what makes somebody great at debate, or highly skilled at debate, and highly skilled at confrontational conversations, is because they're very, very quick to identify the problem with the pillar. And then the next level of that is showing the person what's corrupt about it. That's when it falls down. And so what I'd rather see more than anything for people like you who are trying to discover what truth is to ignore what you think may or may not be true, and instead focus on what that pillar is, which allows you to grasp truth to begin with. And so I think if more people did that in an introspective way, we'd be able to have the most productive conversations on planet Earth with each other. But unfortunately, what we usually do is speak past each other and just kind of speak noise at each other, right? Screech, yell, this type of thing. We never really get to the root cause of any of these issues. And it's really sad to see, honestly.
Well, what's frustrating is when I am watching somebody debate with you who, I think if they would actually listen to you more, they would realize that they're actually agreeing with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this happens all the time when I try to explain, listen, you're actually, you do agree with what I'm saying, right? You just don't realize that you do. There's implications to what it is you're saying, which would lead you to the same kind of conclusion that I have.
Or they've gone in with a judgment of you, right? They're like, Andrew Wilson is this misogynist who hates women, who doesn't, respect women. And then they go in with this.
I mean, it's okay for them to tell the truth. I mean, no, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I don't think you're those things.
No, I'm not those things.
You're a family man with a beautiful wife and children, and you take really good care of your family. You have strong Christian values. And I think, people go into a debate with you and they have a preconceived notion of who you are. And I think that's a weakness that people fall onto when it comes to argument, is they set up what their opinion is of the person they're talking to before they even open their mind to hearing what you might be saying. And regardless of what you're saying, if they agree or if they don't, it's like they've already decided, I don't like you. I'm just going to disagree with whatever you say. And that is another thing that really shows very clearly through the screen,
Well, a lot of that revolves around delivery. So women, especially in modernity, I've never seen people who claim that they want to be strong, independent, badass boss babes, but then crumble in seconds. The second a delivery system isn't structured in such a way as to kiss their ass. So if you say something like, no, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. What are you, a fucking idiot? They go, oh my God, they're aghast. Oh, how could you ever? Right. And meanwhile, they're talking about how they're going to school to be a badass CEO. And I'm like, oh, and this is going to be what makes you crumble. You're going to be at the head of a Fortune 500 company. You're going to be an attorney arguing in front of the Supreme Court, but you're concerned that I said you had a really stupid idea. Well, how about what you do is you move out of the male domain and stop thinking you're interchangeable widgets, because the side of the world which women don't see, most women never see it. It's a side of the world that men are running machines and oil rigs, and they're working in the most god-awful conditions that you can imagine in order to keep society going. They don't give a damn about how they're talked to by the guy next to them.
Yeah.
If they hear, hey, dumbass, throw me that wrench, they'll just say, here you go, Chuck. They don't care. They don't give a shit. They don't have time for it. Who has time for it? But
Right.
For some reason, the delivery system of the pampered modern princess must be such as to not offend their delicate sensibilities,
Right.
lest they have a heart attack and become aghast and their arm fall off from
Yeah.
pulling on their pearls so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. In an ideal world, wouldn't we all just love to be coddled and pampered? Actually, no, I don't think that that would be ideal for most of us because um,
Well,
when
I mean,
you,
uncomfortable must be a state of life for you.
it's
If
very,
you to make those types of gains that you make, I think that being uncomfortable isn't that your status quo?
is my status quo. I don't
Yeah.
think it would be really weird for me to go a day where I'm not challenging myself.
Mhm.
Part of meeting with
Well,
you,
not just that isn't there other things there, right? Like you're
yeah,
dehydrated all the time, or you're not getting this
that's,
amount of nourishment, or you're hungry a lot of the time, or different
yeah.
things because you're trimming for a different show. Like your whole life is built around being just massively uncomfortable.
Well, there is a very strong association with my mindset and my body. So when I suffer, when I train really hard or I'm dieting really hard for a contest, I feel like I dig to such a deep place, and emotions and things and struggles, they surface for sure. And I think there's a really strong correlation, and it's caused me to be like really addicted to the process of getting my body to this extreme level, because I do feel like I get such a strong connection with my mind, and getting into an uncomfortable position has set me up to believe I am somebody who makes myself uncomfortable. Ironically, even just meeting with you in this, I mean, here you and I are two completely different people. This is outside of my comfort zone, but that's one of the things that made me fascinated to want to meet with you here, right? It's like trying to find ways always to totally just get out of my comfort zone. But right now I am training for the Olympia, which is in the bodybuilding world. It's like the Olympics of bodybuilding.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
It's yeah, I think your wife trains. She I don't know if she
Mhm.
competes, but she trains pretty hard. I was looking at that. So yeah, so that's
And
my
she used to even far more when she was younger.
Ooh, ever hit me up.
Yeah. So but the thing is, I mean, I never did, right? I was always just like, yeah, keep yourself in great shape. That's fantastic for me, right? But the thing is that this idea, it's the idea of comfort, which is what actually makes women so uncomfortable having conversations like this, because everything in society is actually tailored for women's comfort. It's just that they don't know that, right?
Yeah.
The temperature is tailored for them. The roads are tailored for them. The police officers who are walking the beat at night to make sure that the bad men stay in the prisons, that's all tailored for them. Everything in society is tailored in such a way that women can have the most comfortable lives that they've ever been able to experience in the history of planet Earth, and they're all miserable. They're all miserable in spite of the fact they've never been more comfortable. They're still miserable. And the reason that they're still miserable is because well, I mean, I would say it's just because just no making women happy. But that aside, I'm kidding. The reason that they're so miserable is because the dating side of the dynamic, they've been sold this kind of great lie, and the great lie is that, hey, if you become just like a man, you're going to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Don't be like one of these slave women who stays at home and is an evil baby factory and then has to submit to her insidiously evil husband who plots daily with his hands doing the Mr. Smithers thing, thinking about the next miserable task to give her because it gives him great joy. This is kind of this indoctrinated lie that women have been sold, and it's just disgusting, because the opposite is true, that women are the most fulfilled when they're good wives and they have children at home. And husbands almost never try to deter women from achieving goals. They actually generally enable women to achieve goals, as long as the woman's putting their duty first to the family. And it's like the whole thing is screwed. It's inverted, right? We gotta flip it back the other way.
Right. We want to be we want chivalry, and we want to be taken care of, and we want to feel like dainty women, but then we want to be badass bitches that just go out there and do everything ourselves.
Right.
It's definitely
We don't need no man until we do.
It's definitely, a conundrum.
Yeah, well, and it's a conundrum, which is purely the construction of modernity. Such these lifestyles, which human beings used to be highly dependent upon locality,
Mhm.
and since they were so dependent upon locality, it was very important that they were able to work within the community for getting a husband and being a woman of high reputation and things like this, because they had to compete with a much smaller pool for the good men who were there. So it was much easier for women to find a good man. It was much easier for a good man to find a good woman. These things were just much easier because they were localized. And now it's a global market of essentially human trading, where also the rhetoric from the state itself is to kind of reinforce to women that they have been a perpetual victim class for the last 8,000 years. And now it's time finally for them to rise up and get their comeuppance against the evil patriarchal system, which has been oppressing them since the time before time forgot, when ultimately the exact opposite is what's occurring. And the more egalitarian we become, and the more like interchangeable widgets women try to be, the more miserable they become.
I would say, though, that I think that this is a commonality, not just for one sex. I think that, like, across the board, I feel like we are in an odd era right now where the victimhood is very real. I think people tend to, uh, you know, we have solved a lot of global problems, and we're in a place right now where people are manufacturing problems out of nowhere, right? And I think that when somebody doesn't really want to get up and do something productive, it feels productive and virtuous to have something to complain about. And if there's nothing to complain about, you have to manufacture something. And I would argue that that is the case across the board. There are men and women and just young people, old people, just across the board. That's kind of where we're at right now. You know what I mean?
Well, people are always trying to
So,
construct social issues to solve, even if there's no social issue to solve.
which is
The idea, yeah, it can be, yeah. So, the idea that that humans are like a continuous work in progress that just need to always be built upon,
yeah.
is kind of silly, right? You can have these really super stable cultures where people genuinely are very happy and the crime rates are very low and people
Mhm.
generally get along fairly well. And you don't really have these kind of intersectional issues, which you find in the United States and in many of the now Western
Yeah.
nations, which are kind of opening their door to the hordes to just kind of come in and reconstruct their entire civilization from the bottom up, using completely different ideals, which then mix with Western philosophy. You have communists who have infiltrated these societies since the 40s, essentially,
Yeah.
and have been implementing feminism everywhere they can. The entire sexual revolution, the entire idea of it, was to take the social structure of patriarchy and remove it completely by empowering women through the idea of sexualization, that they, through this kind of empowerment, by not giving men the idea of their virtue,
Yeah.
that they could somehow interchange with men, and nothing could be further from the truth. It didn't work at all.
Well, that doesn't work. And I think that women can convince themselves all they want that that makes them feel empowered. But I think that there's no denying just our natural instinctual feelings that we have as women. We want to be a rare commodity. We don't want to be somebody that is easy to access. And I think that if we try to convince ourselves otherwise, I think we're just lying to ourselves. And unfortunately, that's what happens is we, if we get to that point where we're making ourselves an easy commodity and we're not a rare specimen or whatever in this idea that we want, it really does. You have to start these women, they have to start justifying, well, okay, then I'm a boss bitch and I'm empowered and I'm, unfortunately, it's part of the justification process, I think, because
Well, it's Schrodinger's feminist. This old idea, Schrodinger's feminist, is the same. I'm the biggest victim on the planet Earth, while at the same time I'm the most empowered.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't articulate that very well because it's hard to get that out. It's not that I'm not articulate. It's just, it's a hard subject to talk about.
Yeah.
Getting it out the right way, and with my worldview filtration of, oh my gosh, who am I going to offend? That's, I think, something that we do, right? It's hard to articulate something when you feel like you're going to offend somebody with
Well,
everything.
it's been driven in you since you were a little kid. All public schools, the idea in public school was to get rid of all forms of masculinity. There's no more rifle teams. There's no more boxing teams. Contact sports are beginning to move by the wayside. They still have things like football, but that's nowhere near as good as pugilism or the kind of in-depth wrestling they used to have. They used to have contact sports, which were pretty good. And if kids got in a fist fight on the playground, nobody really cared. It's just like, well, Tommy, you got beat up. Go wipe your bloody nose off and get back to class. And that was the end of it. But now everything is tailored, and has been for about 40 years or so, towards a female behavior doctrine. And this doesn't surprise me because women are mostly the teachers and the administrators of teaching institutions. And the female behavior doctor is be nice, be nice, don't hurt feelings, be nice, be pleasant, be nice, be nice, be nice, be nice, be nice. And unfortunately, that's the best way to make a bunch of sheep who can just essentially be indoctrinated with whatever worldview they want. And ultimately, most of them are. They never even have thought about them before.
Okay, so I would love to hear your delineation between what you just described as what has been taken away from, masculinity, and what is your delineation between that and the toxic masculinity that you also argue against?
Well, I don't know that I. When you say toxic masculinity,
Like
what do you?
Like the Wes Watson red pill crowd.
Oh, no. Well, I don't think that that's toxic masculinity. I think that that's materialism.
Correct
Yes.
me
So
on
I
my
would
terminology.
say, so the distinction between me and a person like Wes Watson is a strict version of materialism. It's what do we value? So what are the things that we value higher than us? For Wes Watson, it's strictly the idea of social status. And this social status comes to Wes Watson through the means of money, cars, Bugattis, hot women, this type of thing.
Right.
And there's like a social market for this when it comes to social status.
Right.
And so some men look at that and they consider that to be kind of a higher end social status.
Mhm.
And they'll kind of gravitate towards that because they want people to see them in the nice car and them to have all the money and them to have this lifestyle and this and that.
Right.
My idea for high social status is virtue in the family unit. And I think that you get universal respect even from the men driving the Bugatti if you have that. And so when
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, when I look at what people value in social status, especially men, because social status is so important to us, there's some universals that men seem to really appreciate about almost all other men. For instance, an employer is going to be far more likely to hire you if you have a family and you're married.
Yeah.
Why? Because you're stable. He's going to look at that as a sign of stability, a sign that you're probably going to stay at the job for a long time because you have to support your family. If you go into a restaurant, you have a family, you're treated differently than if you walk in when you're single. There is a social status which occurs between people when you have parents who have a family and when you have people who don't.
Mhm.
And I think that this social status is universally ingrained in us. We just treat people who value family and value those ethics around family better than we treat other people for good reason. We should. So I think the ultimate sign in social status for a man is very simple. It's a rejection of materialism, or the idea that you get all of your social wealth from money and fast cars and shit like that, right? Those things are all fun to have. I'm not saying don't have a lot of money, don't have nice fast cars. I'm just saying that ultimately it's worthless in comparison to the highest virtue, the highest social status, which is how you and your family integrate with each other and how people perceive that. That's the highest value you'll ever bring.
And I thought you did a really good job of articulating your argument when you were talking with Wes Watson. And honestly, I think he could have made his argument stronger, but unfortunately, he stood up and he started, putting you down. And I mean, I think that as soon as somebody starts doing that, you instantly feel like this person doesn't feel strongly about their argument. They don't feel like they have really a strong foundation to stand on. And it was clear that he started getting nervous. They started getting scared. You were making a lot more sense. And I think that for him, he could probably feel that everybody who was watching was
Well, they were making a mockery of him because he was Wes Watson was the perfect effigy to kind of hang up and beat up as the effigy of the red pill, right?
right.
This is what it is. It's totally shallow, has no morals whatsoever, has no ethics whatsoever. It's just all about the come up and give me my money, give me my cars, and look at my muscles. And then if you in any way question this, I'll try to browbeat, intimidate, beat you up, whatever those things are, right?
He's been like, on some of his content, he's come across a lot more likable and more motivational, and
well, yeah, nobody's there to question him.
I know that could be it too, where he comes across a lot more likable, a lot more motivational, and I could see people going, wow, you know, he's really made it. But when you know, confronted with you and your worldview, right, it was clear that everybody was drawn to you, and what you were saying made a lot of sense. And I think you know, he got a little bit freaked out in the moment.
Well, from his perspective, you have to understand that a man like myself deserves zero respect. So all of the values which I hold as being the kind of highest tiers of value for men, for Wes Watson, they're antithetical to his entire perspective on life. His entire perspective on life is hoard material. And if you hoard material, your status goes up. This is why I hear things like, you can't even operate at my level, right? You can't tell me what to do. I have a lot of money, right? You can't tell me what's what. I have tons of resources. Yeah. This is kind of the idea of if you hoard the dragon's treasure, you become the dragon. But it's not true. The treasure ends up owning the dragon. The dragon can't leave the cave. The dragon can't fly and relocate. Everybody always knows where the dragon is because the hoard that the dragon has ends up controlling him. He doesn't end up controlling it. And so that's why that virtue is so ultimately meaningless of materialism. The material itself becomes your master and you become its slave.
Right. Which I think becomes clear when you see a panel like that, because when you're it's a one-sided conversation. For example, somebody's talking to an audience on a YouTube channel, right? You're only seeing one side of it. Somebody can come across as being very likable, making a lot of sense and being motivational. But then when you see a whole panel talking about a subject, right, that's when you really start to see worldviews crumble, I guess, as you would call it. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know what, Andrew, I feel like I could honestly talk to you forever. Maybe we can have you back. I would love to honestly continue this conversation. I mean, it feels like it went by like a breeze. I love what you're doing. I don't have to agree with every single thing that you say, but I think that it makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate.
But you should agree with everything I say because it's all true. Every bit of it's true. No dissenters. I'm kidding. Of course, you should be able to disagree in the way that my worldview stays informed and I stay up to date with what's going on is through dissent and through having to rethink the things that I think all the time. My days off are spent in discourse
as well. You're saying.
Well, I'm open to new information, which I can prism through my worldview, sure. And so
that's a good point.
Yeah, so I'm always I'm always going into various debate discords, various places like this, either as an anonymous person or not, and constantly kind of listening to the newest ideas that I can find, how people are articulating them, packaging them. And what's really funny is almost all ideas kind of reduced to just a couple of ideas. They're just always just repackaging the same bullshit as something new and more sophisticated. Where I've always stood out in the debate sphere is because I focus so much on politics and political debating when I get into things like when I debate with Muslims, for instance, I have very creative arguments, or when I argue with atheists, I have creative arguments that kind of people who are trapped inside of the paradigm of arguing these really ancient concepts of atheism versus Christianity, things like this, they're stuck with kind of the tiered arguments which have been used for thousands of years. I'm able to kind of step outside of that and introduce something different. Whether it improves a conversation or not, that's up to the viewer, right? But it's definitely at least a creative way that I can go about attacking a worldview in a position.
I mean, I think that you feel one thing that I can absolutely respect is that you know who you are. you know what you believe in, and you come to every platform with a very strong idea of what your worldview is. I have to question that. I don't know if I have completely thought that through. So you've opened my mind to think a little bit more. And I think that that's one thing that's so good about conversations like this, is
Once you have that, you'll be unstoppable.
thank
Mentally,
you.
you'll mentally be unstoppable if you have the right worldview for which you can interpret information in the world. It'll feel like you're looking through the world with brand new eyes.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been an awesome conversation. I super
Yeah. Well, I
appreciate
hope you got a lot out of it. I gave you a fully loaded AK-47. It's up to you what you do with it.
it. You did. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation as well.
Yeah.
So don't go anywhere. I want to say goodbye to you on the other side, but
Well, I'm still live streaming here, so it'll be right from this, and then I'm doing some other stuff on the stream. So unfortunately,
perfect.
we'll have to when we end the call not have another side, but I do appreciate your time today, and thank you for having me on your program.
Of course.
Also, why don't you take a second, tell everybody where they can find you if they want to follow you, watch your stuff, that kind of thing. I think
Okay,
there's
you're live on yours. For everyone on Andrew's side, my Instagram handle is at Wendy Fortino, WENDYFORTINO. And here I'm on the WOLFpak platform. WOLFpak.official is the Instagram handle for WOLFpak. And then WOLFpak.com if you are in the market for an awesome meal prep management duffel bag or backpack, go there and you will not be disappointed. How's that?
great. Yeah, I think what do we got right now? We just started. I think there's like 2.2 thousand watching. So I think
Oh, wow.
go over, make sure that you subscribe, say hello, all that good stuff. Wendy, thank you so much, and have a good day.
Well, thank you, Andrew. You too. Hopefully I'll be in touch with you. Bye, guys.
All right, take care.